On today's Locked On Thunder, Locked On Cavs crossover, these two teams are on a collision course to the NBA Finals as the top two contenders in the NBA. But what is going to be a successful year for either club?
You are Locked On NBA crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder, Locked On Cavs crossover. I'm Rylan, Siyles, beat writer for Thunder on SI and host of Locked On Thunder. That's Danny Cunningham. You can find him on his Substack and Locked On Cavs every single day, breaking down these two respective teams. Danny, we spent all last season texting back and forth. Oh, I can't wait to see you in Oklahoma City. Can't wait to see you in Cleveland. And it didn't quite go that way for your Cavs, but it's a new year. And still, as we release our Locked On Top 100 for the first time ever, both teams incredibly represented on that list, which just shows the depths and the talents on these two clubs that makes them the top two contenders entering this season. How are you feeling about the Cavs after last year's postseason?
So I think that last year's postseason obviously left a poor taste in everyone's mouth, given the way that the Cavs went out after winning 64 games, having what was the second best regular season in franchise history, and doing it with a young, fun group of players led by Donovan Mitchell. Obviously, Evan Mobley had a breakout season, making an All-NBA team for the first time. But then they were outplayed by the Pacers, and injuries hit at the wrong time. And that is an unfortunate part of the games, that guys can get hurt and not play their best when they need to. But man, this is an organization, Rylan, that I think is ready for this moment. I think maybe even more importantly, I don't know that much else in the Eastern Conference is ready for this moment. So I look at these two teams, Cavs, Thunder, and it is hard to say, in early to mid-September, yes, I'm supremely confident that this is going to be the finals matchup. But in the same breath, I think that these are, I think the Thunder are the best team in the NBA. And you could maybe make a case that Denver is the second best team in the NBA, but I think the Cavs are the best team in the East. And I think getting through the East is a much easier task than getting through the West.
I completely agree with you, and that's why I think that the East, when you look at it, there's only a few contenders that you could really consider to make it all the way. Whereas in the West, there's at least three. I think people have put Houston in that category. And are you really going to discount when the chips are down, like LeBron and Luka and Austin Reeves making a run? It's just going to be tough. And the thing is, in the West, even if the Lakers don't put it together and make a run, or even if any of these, insert any team that you're high on, doesn't make a run, they'll at least make the series that they end up losing more competitive than what we expect the East to do, making their series more competitive. But Danny, when you look at this Cleveland team, take me inside the mind of a Cleveland Cavaliers fan from October until April. You just saw a year ago, it was Thunder, Cavs, neck and neck the whole year, going wire to wire as the best teams in their conferences and trying to get the best record in the NBA. And that's all great, and that's really, really fun. And then it ends in that disappointment. Is there a level in Cleveland yet of kind of wake me up when the postseason starts? I don't want to get too wrapped up into it. Or is this core still so exciting and still so fun that the regular season you really prioritize in Cleveland?
So I think that this group is going to still be a regular season wins machine. I don't know if they're going to win 64 games the way they did last year. I would imagine they'll be somewhere between 57 and 61 if I had to bet on it. With her friends at FanDuel. I don't know if you can bet the exact win total as of right now, but that's kind of where I would be, somewhere in that ballpark. And I think that the way the regular season is going to work for them this year, it's not going to be so much as every game matters so much, or that there are these extreme takes off of every single win. It's yes, the Cavs did this so well on this random night in November. What a great sign. I think there are going to be moments where they have these measuring stick games and they open up in Madison Square Garden against the New York Knicks. That's going to be a big game. They play on Christmas again in Madison Square Garden against the New York Knicks. They play host to the Thunder on Martin Luther King Jr. Day in a rematch of what was I think, Rylan, and maybe you disagree with this, I thought it was the best regular season basketball game last year in the entire NBA when the Thunder came to Cleveland. That'll certainly be a measuring stick game. So I think that they look at it, the Cavs look at themselves as a team in the group of contenders. And I think that is really hard to refute. But I think the only other team in the East in that group is the Knicks. They play the Knicks 3 times. So then you look at it and say, okay, well, both games against the Thunder should be measuring stick games. The 2 games against Denver should probably be considered a measuring stick game, especially considering, they've got Nikola Jokic. They have championship equity. They are a team that you view as that's where we want to be. Outside of that, I think it's going to be hard to come up with these sweeping takes based on the regular season, because this is a group that has won a lot of regular season games. They've not won enough postseason games. So I think that ultimately is where this team's going to be judged. It's not entirely wake me up when April gets here. I think I might take a few naps along the way, wake me up for some of the big games, and then I'll be locked in April, May, and June.
So whenever you look at this Cleveland team, one thing that has followed them throughout this, and obviously last year's playoff gets a little messy because of the injuries, but it's been their small backcourt and how is their defense going to handle the postseason? What are people missing whenever they just continue to cast that as like a worry about Cleveland?
I think what people are missing is the offense hasn't been good enough in the postseason. Defensively, it's not as if they've always been great, but they've not lost in the postseason because they haven't been good enough defensively. And this dates back to Donovan Mitchell's first year in Cleveland when they lost in 5 games to the New York Knicks in the first round. They didn't lose that series because Darius Garland wasn't a good enough defender or Donovan Mitchell wasn't a good enough defender. They lost that series because they couldn't score 100 points in a game. That has been the issue that maybe gets swept under the rug a little bit because you think small backcourt with 2 very dynamic guards, 2 all-star guards, one of which in Donovan Mitchell finished 5th in the MVP race last year and was first team All-NBA. Like, those guys are great. And Donovan had despite being injured, a very good postseason in terms of scoring the basketball, but the rest of the roster needs to be better on offense. And that is kind of the thing that doesn't get talked about, because when you see a small backcourt, you think, oh, bad defensively. And I know that everyone wants to go look at who the Portland Trailblazers were with Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, and that group bad defensively. This Cavs team never really that bad defensively. They've not necessarily been elite in the postseason, but they need to be better offensively in the postseason. That is, to me, the thing that doesn't get talked about quite enough.
So the big addition of Lonzo Ball, what's the expectation level for him as a player this season?
So I look at Lonzo as somebody who can provide a lot of flexibility. And before I say anything, Rylan, I have to give my standard line that I have to say. I think I'm legally required to say it at this point. If Lonzo Ball is healthy, okay, we got that out of the way, because he's played 70 games in 4 years. And that is the one thing that I'm required by law to say every time I talk about Lonzo Ball, is that if he is healthy, what can he do? So I think he provides flexibility, because if you look at who the Cavs were last year, they were a very deep team, but they were a team that when you got kind of far down the bench, they had some one-way players, and Ty Jerome is one of them. And Ty had a great regular season. We briefly touched upon that game that the Thunder played in Cleveland. Ty Jerome had a great game in that game against OKC. That's a big reason why the Cavs won that game. But he kind of became unplayable in the postseason because he was not good defensively. He couldn't defend anybody. He was relentlessly attacked by the Indiana Pacers. Obviously, he's out the door. You look at Isaac Okoro, who was traded for Lonzo Ball. He's a good defender, and I remember you and I talking about him as somebody that the Cavs at times were able to put on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as a variety of defenders they had at the time, and I know their roster has changed a little bit in terms of being able to try and slow down the league MVP, but he couldn't play offense, and he was somebody that opposing teams in each of the last 3 postseasons have said, we are not going to guard you, and that has happened every time, and that is not going to change. Now, Lonzo Ball is not the world's greatest shooter, but he is somebody that is a force offensively because of the way that he can pass and the way that he can create for others. So you do have to respect him on that end. And then he is a plus defender given his size. And I think that is something too that allows the Cavs to play some different lineups. And they love to play, Kenny Atkinson loves to play Sam Merrill at times at the small forward position. And Sam Merrill at the small forward position is out of place. He should be playing much more 2-guard. But if you're playing him in lineups with Lonzo Ball and Donovan Mitchell, Sam Merrill does not have to defend wings. Where if you're playing him in lineups with Ty Jerome and Donovan Mitchell, Sam Merrill has to defend your 3. And that might not go all that well. So I think that he provides the Cavs some 2-way stability when healthy. And I think that was the mission of their offseason, because they added Lonzo Ball, they added Larry Nance Jr., two guys that, if healthy for both of them, because Larry Nash Jr. does not exactly have a sparkling health record either, but if both those guys are healthy, they can give you something on both ends of the floor. And I think if you look at the two teams in the finals last year, and you can speak to this better than anyone, Rylan, Oklahoma City and Indiana, those teams really don't have, outside of their stars, and this is more so with Tyrese Halliburton than this is SGA, because SGA is a good defender, but outside of their stars, they don't have one-way players. They don't have guys you can play off the floor on one end or the other. And now the Cavs don't have that either, and I think Lonzo Ball really is the guy that solidifies that.
Let's talk about that Cavs defense, this Thunder defense. What are the matchups going to be whenever we get to see these teams play, hopefully fully healthy this regular season and possibly in the NBA Finals? Can the Cavs take that next step? And what would be considered a successful year for both teams? But first, I want to say right now, Danny, but our good friends over at 5 Hour Energy, make sure that you try to fuel up when it's time to with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. The grape, ginger, and lime flavored shot brings you the iconic taste of a golf course favorite to a non-alcoholic boost, perfect for sinking birdies and making great memories with friends for a hole-in-one. It's your energy game with 5 Hour Energy. Check them out today, because whether you're on the course or you just need an extra pick-me-up to power through the day in which you're recording multiple podcasts, 5 Hour Energy Transfusion delivers the clubhouse flavor that you love without ever leaving the green. It's the most wild shot you're ever going to hit whenever you bank in on taking this 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. I think that we can all remember a time in which we've had a long day at work and you head into it not knowing how you're going to get through it. 5 Hour Energy going to help you get through it. So make sure you check them out today, because it's all about good times with good people and good flavors. The grape, ginger, lime flavor 5 Hour Energy Transfusion gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without leaving the course or chasing down a bev cart. Right now, you can amp up the fun and just buy, snap, and enter for a chance to win your dream golf trip for 2 of any golf tournaments in the USA. Tee up that trip by visiting 5he-win.com. That's 5-he-win.com for full rules and entry. No purchase necessary. Excludes the Masters tournament. Ends October 31st, 2025. We're back on the Locked On Thunder Cavs crossover, talking about these two contenders. Danny, you mentioned the Cavs defense. Obviously, the Thunder had a historically great defense a year ago and bring back 90% of their roster, only losing Dillon Jones off of that main club. So they expect to have an elite defense yet again. The matchups, though, across the board are interesting. Clearly, Shai is a difficult to defend, and J-Dub took a leap in the playoffs, and Chet Holmgren's expected to be better offensively, plus their ancillary role players who are also able to score. When you look at this Cavs team, what matchups are you looking forward to seeing them throw at Shai?
So I think guys that they can put on Shai have changed a little bit, because Isaac Okoro no longer there. Karis LeVert obviously has not been in Cleveland since prior to the trade deadline last year, and the Cavs didn't have their current roster in either of the games they played against Oklahoma City last year. And the players that I look at, DeAndre Hunter is one, Dean Wade is another one, and Dean is entering a contract year. I think that offensively he's got some flaws because he's not aggressive enough to be on the floor at all times, but he's got the length. And I think when you look at the way to slow down Shai, because of the uniqueness of his game, I kind of think that you can sacrifice a little bit of quickness for length, if that makes sense. And I think that's why the Cavs are uniquely positioned to maybe slow him down a little bit. Now, Oklahoma City has a lot of other ways that can hurt you, but I do wonder too if Lonzo Ball could be a good guy to have on Shai. As you look at it, what do you look at? I'm very curious from your perspective. What do you look at it in a good Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, not stopper, but we'll say slower downer?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, is like there's no stopper, but there are guys who can make him a little less efficient, who can slow down his game and thus kind of clog things up for the rest of the offense. And whenever you look at those archetypes that are able to do it in the past, it's guys who aren't quick, like what you said. They're mobile, and there's a little bit of difference in that. It's like, can you move your feet enough to stay in front while having the length to make up for whenever he inevitably gets you off balance? And if you can do that and avoid fouling because he's so good at manipulating his actions to where he's able to get guys behind them or get guys to jump first or get guys to reach in at the wrong time. And he takes advantage of that. You've almost got to defend perfectly, and it's very hard to do. But we have seen guys that do it, including last year with Minnesota, having guys like Jalen Clark have success, having guys like Terrence Shannon have success. And so like even names that you might not expect, right, to have right away success against SGA. They have Dean Wade has found some success against SGA, but you mentioned him there. When I look at this Cavs team, if he's healthy, Lonzo Ball's an interesting player to put on the Shai.
You did it.
If he's healthy.
If he's healthy.
I know you have to say it, and I'm gonna make sure that you don't get in trouble legally with the Cleveland PD over there. So if he's healthy, Lonzo Ball's a name that I'm interested in. I think that Dean Wade's a unique matchup for him, and who I would try to defend him with as much as you can get away with offensively in that area. Let me ask you about Charlie Tyson. This is a guy that I found really interesting out of college as a defender, and his ability to use his leverage underneath of guards is interesting when it comes to Shai, but it's going to be really hard to crack this rotation and crack this team. What's the plans for him?
So I think with Jalen Tyson, he will get the opportunity early on in this season because, as everyone knows, Max Strus had foot surgery not too long ago, and he's not going to be available. I would be stunned if he plays in 2025. I would imagine that we see him near the start of 2026 come back from that Jones fracture, which, in Oklahoma City, Kevin Durant had this way back in the day. Like, this is an injury that a lot of Thunder fans are familiar with from over a decade ago at this point. But you look at that and say, okay, well, the Cavs are going to be at the start of the season a little bit thin on the wing because Max Strus won't be available. Lonzo Ball, I would imagine they're not going to want to play him a ton. And I know Jalen Tyson does not play point guard, but that is still a wing type defender that you can look at as minutes available in the rotation. Darius Garland might not be available. That just all kind of shifts things around a little bit. So I do think there will be an opportunity for Jalen Tyson. He was the 20th overall pick in last year's NBA draft. Didn't get a huge opportunity because it's really difficult, believe this or not, really difficult for rookies to go in and make a big impact on a team that wins 64 games. It just doesn't often happen. So I think that this year is going to be a big one for him because he's going to have a chance to play probably between 18 and 23 minutes on a nightly basis for the first couple of months of the season. And if Tyson is the guy that they believe he can be, which is sort of like an oversized Josh Hart, where Josh Hart is 6'4", does a lot of the little things, does the dirty work, gets rebounds, can score a little bit. Jalen Tyson is bigger than that. He is 6'6", 6'7", but can he do a lot of those things? I think if he can, the Cavs are going to feel really good about themselves. And I talked about this earlier in the week, and on my podcast it is. And I do not imagine this to happen. I would not bet on this to happen. But our NBA Top 100 list came out earlier this week that Locked On put together. You and I voted on this. Both the Thunder and the Cavs both had a lot of guys in this list. If the Cavs are going to, if there's anybody on the roster right now that is not in the top 100, that is in the top 100 next year, Jalen Tyson's the guy because he's not done much of anything in the NBA, but the talent is there and the opportunity is there, which is almost more important. So can he play well enough in the first 3 months of the season to when Max Strus does get back that Kenny Atkinson still needs to find minutes? Maybe. I don't know. That to me is going to be one of the most interesting storylines the Cavs have for the first couple of months.
I agree. And I find it to be like the biggest reason to continue to watch this Cleveland team. And Oklahoma City has questions like that as well, where even though they were so dominant in the regular season, and even though they're on a collision course to have a deep playoff run, there's still these little questions that seem relatively small potatoes, but you can see the difference that they can make in the postseason if they're able to answer them properly throughout the regular season and continue to bolster themselves in that direction. Now, coming up, I want to ask you about Evan Mobley as it relates to Chet Holmgren, and then we'll talk about what is the biggest success story, what's the most you can do in terms of passability for each team. We're back. I'm Locked On Thunder, Locked On Cavs crossover. Danny, we're talking about these two teams who are in that tier of top contenders and who I think right now you are going to see a lot of projections for the NBA Finals between these two teams. when you look at Evan Mobley, what's the feeling around him? And I say this as though, he's only 24 years old, but he's had such a resume at the NBA level that I'm curious what, if anything, that you still think is out there for him to work on and develop on and grow on. Because at 24, I don't think he's tapped out of his potential. Because with Chet, it's very easy because there's less of a resume. He's gotten hurt twice, and you're still waiting on some of the things to come around in his game, especially offensively. With Chet, you have that 9-game sample size, very small sample size, to look back on last year. That 9-game sample size before the hip injury, he was averaging 18 points per game, 9 rebounds a game, 2 assists a game, a steal, and 3 blocks per game, while shooting 40% from 3, while taking 5 attempts at the free throw line a night. And that player would, if he's able to get back to that, and that's an if because of the injury history, but if he's able to get back to that, like, that player would inject something brand new into this Thunder team that just won a championship. And he was a big part of them winning a championship because he's so elite defensively. Evan Mobley, of course, we know is great on both ends as well. Like, is there something within the top players on this team who are still young, similarly to the top players on the Thunder's team, which are still young, that people are eyeballing to want to see from them?
So I think with Evan, it's a little bit more 3-point volume is the one area that people are going to point to. And there was a very clear line in the sand last year with Evan. And that line in the sand was December 7th, when the Cavs played a afternoon game against the Charlotte Hornets. It was in Charlotte. Evan Mobley hit 6 3-pointers in that game. He hit 5 3-pointers, Rylan, in the first quarter of that game, which that first quarter, if he would have sat down, untied his shoes, and not gotten off the bench, that would have been the most 3-pointers he hit in any game in his career. But he hit one more. He scored 41 points, and that was the day. Like, I was getting texts from people across the league that just said, it's happening. Like, we are watching in this moment, Evan Mobley grow and evolve. And starting with that game, his 3-point volume doubled the rest of the season. He went from shooting, I believe, 2.1 threes per game, which in an admittedly small sample size, playing games before December 7th, not the biggest chunk of the season, but it went from around 2 to around 4, 4.5. And I think that this year, the Cavs would prefer him to be around 5 3-pointers attempted per game. And can he do that while still shooting roughly 37, 38%? I think so. Can Evan Mobley add strength? Can he be somebody that is more of a force with the basketball in his hands? I think so. Can he become a guy that has a little bit of a tighter handle with the basketball? I think so. Those are the things, or those are the areas, I guess I should say, where Evan can still take a step forward. Because I went into last year, Rylan, thinking Evan's probably going to make an all-NBA team at some point. He'll make some all-star teams. He might win a defensive player of the year. He will be a fixture on the all defense team. And then he took these steps forward on both ends of the floor. And like his defensive floor is already just outrageously high. Like, he's always going to be a really, really great defender, but he took steps forward on both ends of the floor. And my opinion of him went from what I just said to now, I think Evan Mobley is going to be a guy that makes multiple first team all NBAs, that probably doesn't win an MVP, but is in top 5 for MVP voting in multiple years, that he can block out All-Star Weekend on his calendar because he's going to be there every year for the next however many years he can be. That is what I think Evan's going to be, because I think he's going to do those things I mentioned offensively, maybe not all of it at once this year, but I think that's going to be his continued development as he moves forward.
And when you look at these two teams, like, to me, the thing that's not defined is what's passable, because the best case for both teams is they win the championship, and that's like their ceiling on the year. The disastrous case for both teams is, for some reason, they regress. They might not make the playoffs. They have injuries that keep them out. They don't get out of the first round.
These two teams are making the playoffs, Rylan. I will take it to the bank. The Cavs and the Thunder, even in their worst case, are, especially the Cavs, given the East. I mean, the West is a gauntlet. Like, I'll give you that. But in the Eastern Conference,
Sands injuries and all that stuff. Like, the injuries, would be devastating. But let's take that out of the equation. What's the middle ground between because anything short of a title would be disappointing. But I still think that if you avoid a disaster, like, disappointing is just kind of what it is. What would be passable for both teams if we can acknowledge that winning the championship and having all the luck that's involved in that, having all the things go right that's involved in that, is hard to obtain. So it's not like championship or bust for these two teams who both still have young cores and both still have runways with what they're trying to do here. What's a result that could make you feel bummed because you didn't win the championship, but you're not going to be crucified? You can't lose any more hair, but you're not going to be crucifying the team for the whole offseason.
So, one, I love that you said that. Two, I think it's weird because I actually think the Cavs bar is a little bit higher than the Thunder's. I think for the Cavs, if they don't get to the finals, this year is a failure. They've not had the postseason success to correlate with the regular season success that they've had in this Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Darius Garland era. Last year, they won 64 games. They were the best or second best team the entire season. It was them and it was the Thunder. And then there was a gap before Boston. Like, it was those two teams were far and away the two best regular season basketball teams. And the Thunder went and won the title and the Cavs lost in the second round. If given the state of the East, where you don't have to worry about the Indiana Pacers as a postseason threat because Tyrese Halliburton is not going to play, you probably don't have to worry about the Boston Celtics as a postseason threat because Jason Tatum probably won't play. And even if he does play, that Boston roster, I do not think is very good and might even get a little bit worse. You have to look at New York and say, can the Cavs beat the Knicks in the postseason? And maybe Orlando pops up and has a good year. Maybe Atlanta pops up and has a good year. But for the Cavs, it's, can they get by New York? And I think that answer should be yes. Like, I think on paper, the Cavs are a more talented basketball team than the Knicks, and I trust their coaching more than I trust Mike Brown in New York. So I say, okay, the Cavs should get to the finals. They are favorites to get to the finals. And I think in Oklahoma City, it should almost be looked at, and I would love to hear you tell me I'm wrong here. I think if the Thunder lose to anybody other than the Cavs or the Denver Nuggets, it's a failure. And I say Denver because, yes, SGA won the MVP, and I thought he deserved it, and I would have voted for him last year had I had an MVP vote. But I also, in our top 100, voted Nikola Jokic as the number one player because I think he is the best player in the world right now. And I think if you lose to the guy that I consider to be the best player in the world, whether it's in the conference semifinals because maybe the Denver Nuggets don't win a lot of regular season games, and I think the Thunder are going to just decimate teams in the regular season again. Maybe it's the conference finals. But I look at that and say, if OKC loses to a guy who took them to 7 games last year with a much worse roster than I think he has right now, I'm not sure I can call that a failure. If they lose to Houston, if they lose to any other team in the West, or let's say the Knicks or the Magic or the Hawks somehow come out of the East, I think that's a failure. But if they lose to a team that won 64 games last year and I think got better, or the guy who I think is the best player in the world, it's hard for me to say that's a failure.
Yeah, I'm more with you than I'm not on that parameter, because for me, like, whenever I was just thinking about what a success would be for this question, I'm thinking West Finals is like, it's disappointing to lose it, but you made it further than the past champions have in this parity era, and in all likelihood ran into Jokic. And so, like, that's who I was thinking of. So I would agree, even though Houston got a lot better, and Houston I think is a good team and a competitive team. Sure. When you look at this Thunder team and what they're going to do, and this is obviously if everyone's playing this season straight up and they're healthy and nothing goes wrong, the Thunder would have a historically great defense. They can't possibly shoot worse than they did last year in the postseason. They still won. And I say that to say this, unlike Mazzulla Ball, like, this identity of who the Thunder are is translatable 10 times out of 10, home, road, year over year, with what they do defensively to spark offense and their home court advantage as a team that's the deepest team in the NBA, the most talented team in the NBA, that should win a lot of regular season games, even in the tough Western Conference, should have their 3rd straight number 1 seed, thus not heading on the road for the entire West playoffs. I think that there's an opportunity for Cleveland to get the best record in the NBA, because if they take the regular season seriously, they just have more cupcakes to beat up on, frankly. Yeah. So it's like, if you get 4 games against, Washington instead of 4 games against, Dallas or whatever, then you're going to have a better opportunity if you're in the East to have the best record overall. Only having to play the West twice, of course, is another big deal for the Cleveland Cavaliers and whoever we think is the best team in the East in the regular season. But all that to say, I would agree that losing to anyone in the West but Jokic, actually losing the series to anyone in the West but Jokic, would be very disappointing, and it would be considered a failure because they likely don't make it to the Western Conference Finals this season. I would open up a conversation about like, what if the Knicks just put it all together? They won a couple games in the Garden, and then they stole a game in OKC, and then they've won the series, but with a coin toss series, because they're pretty talented, and of course by that, if they made it all the way there, they have to make it there with their best players healthy and available. So like they can run those guys into the ground for one last series and try to get it together and capitalize on a team in OKC that is playing deep into the playoffs yet again in June. And by this time, they're running on fumes as a young team that hasn't played that stretch before. We know how hard it is to have this condensed offseason and then go on another deep playoff run. So I would say reaching the finals, automatic success, win or lose. Reaching the Western Conference Finals is passable, win or lose, but losing to anyone besides Jokic is disappointing and would have to really review how it happened, and likely considering it a failure.
So the thing about New York that I will push back on, specifically as it relates to Oklahoma City, the reason why I would not view that the same as losing to the Cavs if you were the Thunder is the way the Knicks are built, where their two best players are, I think, significant defensive liabilities. Like Jalen Brunson is a bad defender and Karl Anthony Towns is a bad defender. And the way that Oklahoma City is built, where they just they can pick apart those matchups where, Donovan Mitchell is not a great defender, but he's a better defender than Jalen Brunson is. Yeah. And then you look at the second best player. Well, Evan Mobley just won Defensive Player of the Year. Like there is a huge difference between who Evan Mobley is defensively and who Karl Anthony Towns is defensively. So I just look at how those two teams match up. And I think the Thunder, like if those two teams could right now, and I don't believe FanDuel has this stuff available at the moment. Why would they? Because it's September. But I would imagine that the Thunder would be heavier favorites in the finals against the Knicks than they would be the Cavs. I think that the odds between a Thunder Cavs series would be much tighter than a Thunder Knicks series.
Yes, especially if it's about what happens when they first open it up on the court. Because obviously public money and everything can influence the lines because of the Knicks and how big of their fan base is and everything. But in terms of just basketball, I agree. I think that you're right, that at the end of the day, we're talking about this in September. We're not talking about this with any of the facts. What we know today of these rosters and of their health situation, with right now the Thunder only missing Thomas Schwarber and the Cavs are in the Knicks, and everybody going to be healthy by the time the playoffs get here, knock on wood, hopefully. Then yeah, I agree with you that it'd be a failure to lose to a team that doesn't roster Nikola Jokic or is not the Cleveland Cavaliers, because when you look at that Knicks team, they can't exploit any matchup, and the Thunder should be able to exploit a ton of matchups. And Cleveland, you can make the argument, can exploit matchups, but and maybe New York, if anyone from New York's listening to this, maybe they'll disagree. I just think that when you look at Donovan Mitchell, I trust him more than Jalen Brunson in the sense of facing an elite defense and figuring it out, because he has the leverage of leveraging the floor is what I mean by that, with a guy like Jared Allen setting screens, with a guy like Evan Mobley, with a guy like, Darius Garland next to him. Like those things all help him. Whereas with New York, especially for the Thunder style of defense, you're concerned with Brunson and Cat, and that's kind of it. And then you fly out and contest everyone else after the fact. You're reactive to those guys. Cleveland has more guys who you're being proactive to defensively, which makes you susceptible to having breakdowns defensively. So I think that'd be a great series. And I really hope, because you mentioned it, this was the best regular season game. And the teams weren't healthy for that regular season game, but it was still the best. That's how deep and talented these two groups are, that even whenever they're not healthy, they still produce the best basketball. Let us get there healthy, both in the regular season and the postseason, and just have this out for a whole series. I think it'd be very fun, Danny. This has been a very fun crossover.
Yes, it's been a blast. I cannot wait to have you on Locked On Cavs once the season gets here for the Monday whip around shows as Cavs and Thunder approach. I believe the first matchup is Martin Luther King Day, if I'm not mistaken.
It'll be fun. We'll be there. We'll be everywhere. Locked On Cavs 5 days a week. Locked On Thunder the same way. Go check out Danny Cunningham over there at Locked On Cavs. I'm Rylan Siyles, host of Locked On Thunder. For your next listen, go check out Locked On Grizzlies, and I'll tell you why, because they're still upset about the top 100 list. They think it's an affront to basketball that the Grizzlies don't have more players on that list than the Cavs and Thunder. Go see why at Locked On Grizzlies. Until then, be good and be good to one another.